Hello, everyone. Adrian Sanabria here again, co-founder of Security Weekly Labs and Security Weekly podcast co-host. Thank you for joining us for another installment of SE Media's In Focus. These interviews feature some of the top thought leaders in the cybersecurity space. This is an opportunity for these experts to share hindsight on recent events and foresight on where you should be focused as a cybersecurity professional today and in the near future. Joining me again is Derek Manky, the Chief of Security Insights and Global Threat Alliances at Fortinet's FortiGuard Labs. Derek, good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you again too. Always enjoy chatting with you, Adrian.
Yeah. This is I've come to look forward to these, and again, we get to look forward to yet another report coming out, and you guys have some very interesting information in this new report.
Yeah, I think so. It continues to evolve, and it has to, right, as the threat landscape evolves, of course.
Yeah, so this is the Global Threat Landscape Report, and correct me, you put it out twice a year, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, this biannual. So this report is, looking at all the activity we saw through the first half of 2021.
So first off, we're going to talk about the state of things, where things are going. There's definitely some notable changes in the threat landscape, and then as we did in our last episode, we're going to end it on a positive note. There's some really cool positives and some great research, that's coming out of the team there at your labs.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
So, just talking numbers about ransomware, it looked like, now that we have full data to compare, the first half of this year with 2020. Talk about what we've seen in terms of, clearly ransomware is the thing. Everybody's talking about ransomware. We know it's on the rise, but how much is it on the rise, and who is getting targeted the most?
Yeah, so this is one of those things that has continued to really snowball, unfortunately, but it's clearly reflected in the data. If you look at the report that we issued last year, the second half of 2020, we saw a notable increase in Q4, actually towards the end of Q4, specifically December 2020 timeframe. So before then, it was most of the ransomware malware family activity was relatively low, and I think this was really, Adrian, falling in the wake of the initial COVID hangover. I mean, again, it was sort of all lures and targets on COVID-19, social engineering, and different things that cyber criminals were up to. Of course, then after that initial wave, the first wave, there was more diversification, right? More doubling down, if you will, from cyber criminals, looking at how they can expand from that, look at different, this is where we started to see the rise, of course, of more high profile targeted ransom campaigns, but just more family activity. And there's a lot of it, right? Like from, Trickbot, Emotet, all these different things that we started to see. At that point in time, in the second half, it was just over a 700% or a sevenfold increase in ransomware activity. If you look at the data now from the first half, that absolutely continued. It didn't dip from that December. That was the start of it. And if you look through the first half, it just continues to build. Looking at that year over year, we're actually close to 11-fold. It's about 10.7-fold. So, over 1,000% increase just attributed to ransomware activity. And looking at the targets, that's also, their targets are, it's a wider net. I would say what we saw last year is still true. So telecommunications and government were in our top three, but now we've also seen a rise in targets with MSSP, which is concerning, and manufacturing and operational technology too.
Yeah, and with MSSPs, what does that look like? Is that like a double ransomware case where they're both going after the MSSP and then independently trying to extort the customers of the MSSP at the same time? Is that why they're going after them?
Yeah, we're seeing a mix of both, definitely. It is that one to many in terms of ROI from cyber criminals point of view. It's one to many, impact, right? And unfortunately, that means an indirect, for any direct attack on an MSSP, of course, it's an indirect impact to all the customers behind that. So that's what I mean about the wider net as well, too.
Yeah. And, there was a note in here about a shift away from email initiated payloads. And, for a long time, like that's, still been the major way that they're getting in. I'm sure they're still using it to some extent, but what's that about? What's that shift about?
The new buzzword, WFH, right? Work from home or work from anywhere. This has been driving more web traffic, right? So of course we still have, email hasn't changed. We still have all the email traffic that we saw before, and certainly still, it's not like email-borne threats have gone away. We still see a lot of those, but for the first time last year, we reported on seeing web-based, web-borne threats, actually in terms of prevalence, take over and pole position for activity that we're seeing over email. It wasn't, we're not talking about a 90% to 10% split. It was very close, but it had taken over. But that's continuing to grow. And what we're seeing is malvertising. So we're seeing a lot of JavaScript, obfuscated JavaScript delivering malicious payload, malvertising and scare tactics. So we actually have seen some old families that have resurfaced. And this is quite interesting to me because, we've been covering security a long time, and this is digging up memories from 10 years ago with scareware. When we had these binaries, saying you had 50 viruses, and in a lot of cases actually locking out access to systems, which is like the first early versions of ransomware. But now we're seeing a new form of it, right? In terms of web-based scare tactics, web-based scareware, not the email ones that we were used to seeing a year or two ago or longer, that were saying, they've seen you doing all these things on camera or have your credentials, and really is more that scare and extortion on baseless claims. Now it's trying to impersonate IT, human resources, to technical support staff as well, saying that you have issues, you have to call us. So it's a little more mild in their social engineering lure, but that's what we're seeing out there. And it's interesting game shift for the cyber criminals.
Do you think that's an effect of doing a better job, maybe on the email security side, or maybe even on the security awareness side? Yeah, I often wonder if our successes in one area push the criminals in a different direction where maybe we're less prepared.
I really do think so. It's a good point. I've also thought that before too. I think it does. When people start to become numb to some of again, it was like that, going back to what I talked about at first, that first wave, right? The hot target was the COVID-19 lures are very successful on that, but they had to shift tactics at some point in time. And I think it's the same thing for those, the scare tactics on email, even robocalls, right? I think almost every one of my friends gets robocalls, and they're very well aware that, hey, this is a scam call coming in now. And it's the same mentality. I think that's with a higher level of awareness, I think I am seeing that there has been a bigger focus for education. Even just in day-to-day life, right? If people ask me what I do and I say cybersecurity, everyone says, wow, that's really important. And they get it now. 5-10 years ago, a lot of people didn't fully understand what cybersecurity was. So I think the level of education is definitely a lot higher, and it is making them be more creative. Yeah.
So it sounds like maybe a recommendation there to shift awareness campaigns and education, to keep up with what the bad guys are doing here, which clearly, some kind of, I don't know if you consider it a Waterhole attack, some of these JavaScript insertions, or if it's just opportunistic.
A bit of both. Absolutely. Yeah. Waterhole attacks we are seeing included in that too. And again, it's going back to what we've talked about before, you have these hybrid environments, right? Workstations that are being used for personal use sometimes, or browsing off hours, as it were, unsegmented, whatever it is. The fact is that's happening, right? There's more traffic being driven to those sites, and attackers are trying to capitalize on that.
All right. Yeah. So shifting a bit, I was really interested to see some of the botnet trends here because, when you say botnet, that takes me back a bit, yeah, I was surprised to see that Mirai is still around. Like,
Yeah.
it's surprising to me. I just haven't heard about it in a while. And I figured everybody went out and secured their IoT stuff. So I don't know if they're just moving on to new IoT devices, or if the same devices never got remediated. So what's going on with botnets?
Yeah. I think botnets will always be around in different, again, they're going to be creative with it. But I mean, in essence, a botnet is just really that exfil, that C2, that exfiltration channel, unless the attackers are knocking on doors and physically going into buildings, which can happen in rare cases. It's all about that protocol command and control channel. And IoT is very favorable because the command and control is sitting, in some cases, we've seen mesh networks where it's sitting in people's homes and not in a data center. And it's much more difficult for law enforcement to go in and to take those offline as an example. And of course, it's just a way wider attack surface, right? You have so many different platforms, firmware versions, platforms, therefore typically more opportunities and holes. And that's what we're seeing with Mirai. We've actually seen a lot of leverage on, basically supply chain that it can go after, right? So vulnerabilities that exist through multiple vendors that are incorporating libraries, as an example. That if you remember shell shock, that sort of problem, right? Way back in the day with bash vulnerability at that point in time. But obviously we're not seeing that, but we are seeing similar tactics, and that's what's really allowing it to thrive, right? There's continuous new infections. Again, typically, if you look at our report again, with the CVEs of vulnerabilities, a lot of them are still, this has been true for years. They're still in that 2 to 3 year old range, but we are starting to see some fresh ones also from 2021 being used for IoT as well too, which is concerning.
And those IoT devices are those, I think in the early days with Mirai, we saw like a lot of commercial cameras that you'd use in property, like Hikvision, that kind of thing. Yeah. Are we now seeing more consumer IoT devices, stuff you'd see in a home network, or is it still mostly business IoT?
No, consumer as well. Yeah, we're definitely seeing consumer and a blend of that too. And again, this is that waterfall effect, right? Where again, a lot of those this is the classic Android problem that we've talked about before, right? Where you have that one to many, right? So if a patch is issued for Android, you have all these different branches of that, right? And all these different implementations, and they all have to update, and that takes time. And it's the same thing that we're seeing with, the consumer devices that have common libraries, technologies, flaws put into them. And at the same time, there still are the old school favored techniques that unfortunately still work. Default passwords, right? And brute force attacks through SSH, things like that. Those we're still seeing out there. Granted, they are becoming less and less effective. I mean, the default password issue is getting a bit better, but it's still there too.
Yeah. And hopefully regulation helps with that a bit. I know we've seen a bit there, like California says no more default passwords.
Yeah. That's a great point.
We need broader adoption than that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So moving on to the positive stuff, I think maybe our lawyers and law enforcement, the unsung cyber heroes here. Like I know a couple of years back, we saw Microsoft lawyers do a bunch of botnet takedowns. And this year, it looks like we've seen a lot more, or at least a big batch of takedowns and disruptions happen with a lot of these ransomware crews.
Yeah. Yes. It's all starting to gel, I would say. So yes, I mean, unsung heroes, but not just them. I mean, I really think this is a team effort, as it were, and I'm really happy with that. I mean, there's been a lot of always goodwill in the industry. I mean, everyone I talk to, in our industry, whether it be another, security vendor or a research house or even law enforcement, of course, there's always goodwill. Like, yes, we want to work together. Yes, we want to fight cybercrime. How do we do it? It's been difficult. It's been years of making and successful milestones, like the Cyber Threat Alliance is an example, a great success story that we co-founded way back in 2014. That's a private sector, right? And that's a game changer. Like we changed the game on how we can level the playing field on intelligence. We actually share blogs before they go out as an example, so we can get a higher level of security stack, make it networks more resilient, that whole story. So that's one part of that, one piece of that puzzle. But the other piece absolutely is the law enforcement, not only just working on cases of what we call the Holy Grail, of course, going after the attribution of prosecutions and arrests. That's happening more, which is really sort of the end game, and that's amazing. I'm very happy with that, and that's tremendous progress. And we can talk about some of those cases. But the other part is the infrastructure too, right? So that's, as you mentioned, Microsoft DCU. We've been involved in also working with Interpol and the Cyber Fusion Center as an example, mapping out that complex infrastructure, understanding it, because unless you understand botnets and protocols and topologies and how they work, you can't just pull a plug and expect it to go away. You have to pull a million plugs at the same time and have a coordinated response to it. And that's what this is all about. A lot of these things coming together, including the World Economic Forum that we're involved in. And we're seeing results, right? Like the arrests. One of the most significant things that stood out to me this year. So first of all, we saw Emotet, we saw Trickbot, we saw Netwalker, COP. So that's already much more than the one per year, maybe, that we're used to in the past, which is fantastic. And that's that gelling, more people coming, more stakeholders coming to the game. With Netwalker, they actually arrested one of the affiliates, and this was someone who had made $28 million through extortion. Wow. And that was just one affiliate, not Netwalker itself, but one affiliate. But the point is they arrested an affiliate, and that sends a strong message back, because without that, I think all these quote unquote business partners or affiliates just have a confident sense of security when they go in thinking that they'll be untouched.
Yeah. And I was listening to a podcast with, they were interviewing Art Coviello, and that was something he was talking a lot about is going after these safe havens, that a lot of the ransomware operators operate from. And certainly, if we can, put some pressure, it doesn't have to be everybody, right? Just, as long as the risk is a little bit higher for them, maybe we can make an impact on.
There was a recent report that was put out from the US Gov that the chances of a physical criminal to, if they commit an act of crime, to be caught is about 50 to 60%. And on their estimation, cyber criminal is about 0.5%, which is way too low. Way too low. And but again, we're making progress on that. But so it's a lot of good news, but a lot of work to be done at the same time, but headed in the right direction. Yeah,
great. And the last positive note I wanted to touch on was it looks like you've done a bunch of work. I'm sure this is always going on, analyzing malware, looking at the different techniques used by attackers in these malware, what they go after in systems. But it looks like we're definitely seeing some patterns, and this research, you've pulled some details out that defenders can actually use to hopefully detect and even automatically respond to some of these threats.
Yeah, this is really exciting. This is the first time we've showed this data. This has been years in the making from a technology perspective. So I refer to this as higher resolution intelligence. What I mean by that, I guess the best analogy is going back to printers and the DPI, or dots per inch, right? If you're trying to understand a cyber criminal operation, so a kill chain as an example, if you print it at lower resolution, you're just seeing the standard kill chain, right? So everything from penetration to lateral movement to exfiltration, what's happening there. And there's malware, IPs, URLs, IOCs associated with it. What we're able to do now is we're working closely with MITRE to get real-time TTP data. So the techniques, tactics, procedures. A lot of people now are familiar with MITRE ATT&CK. It's a great framework. There's mappings, of course, to capabilities. So like APT groups and cybercrime, ransomware groups. What are they capable? Like what's been observed, but that's just a static map. We have a dynamic map now we've created. So we're actually getting real-time data every day coming in, mapped to these campaigns saying, what are the hot techniques? In other words, what are the ways that they're trying to do penetration? What are the ways they're trying to do lateral movement, privilege escalation, defense evasion? And that's really interesting, right? Because now we can get more into looking at the actual techniques and tactics, which of course, going back to the level of education, we want to expose that, because the more that we expose that and protect against that and educate it on it, the harder it is for them to shift those tactics. They got to go back and write new pieces of code, right? And so what we're doing, Adrian, is we're creating a heat maps, and we have some visualization of this in the report, which shows a red, yellow, green covering of what are the hot ones. And that allows us to focus, to hone in on those, so we can actually start, looking at everything from solutions to, again, exposing that, making people educated and aware. It's no secret or surprise, I would say, that some of the hottest ones we saw in the first half was defense evasion. Cyber criminals are always trying to get around security, but we have to be aware of that and in detail, and that's what we're showing here, right? And as well as privilege escalation. Lateral movement, we saw one of the hottest techniques for lateral movement was still through removable media. So trying to latch on to auto runs and thumb drives as an example.
Interesting. That's crazy. So, good luck with the network segmentation, but
yeah,
they can still hop and skip around that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's incredibly important. You point out, like, moving to make this dynamic, we've always been kind of a few steps behind in terms of speed on the defender side, and closing that gap, being able to respond more quickly, I think makes it less of a leapfrog game.
Yeah, definitely. And so we're working on these. We're actually a research sponsor with MITRE Ingenuity, the Center for Threat Informed Defense. So part of this dynamic data we're coming is from the sightings ecosystem. So it's a project that's been spun up there. So it's not, we have our own implementation. There's other members coming in. So we're trying to actually create an ecosystem to share some of that information on TTP data, attack data. And the most recent one is the attack flow project. So this is more of the machine learning, statistical analysis. So looking at the chaining of events, right? Again, higher resolution from our observations. What are the actual paths, like in terms of techniques, right? So, are they doing defense evasion first and then privilege escalation? And then, and how does that look, right? So the more we can understand that, the more we can start to put that into this, sort of digital DNA and mapping of the makeup of these organizations, right?
And obviously the report will have pointers to those projects, but for this video, where should people go to follow that research, to check out that the collaboration stuff with MITRE?
Yeah, sure. So we'll continue to put updates on our blog, blog.fortinet.com. You can also check out MITRE's site. They have the CTID, MITRE Ingenuity Center for Threat Informed Defense. That's all the official updates from MITRE on the center, which is really an R&D hub with multiple projects that are going on. Awesome.
Well, Derek, it was amazing talking to you today. But with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We've been talking with Derek Manky from Fortinet's FortiGuard Labs. Derek, thank you for being in focus with us today.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Till next time.